East Coast, West Coast show, episode 1. We're going to go over kind of the history of East Coast, West Coast, where we grew up, our past. But first, I want to introduce you to the two other people on the call right now. The first person I'm going to introduce you to is my cousin. This is Anthony Ciccarelli. We call him Chick or Chicky. Chick is an actor in Hollywood, and he's also a producer and a bartender, and he is a pretty well-known New Jersey Guido from back in the day in Cedar Grove and the Belmar area. But he's going to be kind of moderating a lot of the calls. You may have seen him on the COVID call as well, but he will be answering a lot of the asking a lot of the questions and kind of moderating the calls going forward, and hopefully providing some comedic relief. That'll kind of help him brush up on his acting, and maybe he'll be the next Joe Pesci or something.
Or Christopher Walken.
He does a really good Christopher Walken impression too. We'll get into that later. And then Cameron Gardner is the other owner of the New Jersey side of East Coast, West Coast, and he is on the call as well. We're just here to kind of talk to you about kind of the origins of the gym and how we became enthusiasts in strength and fitness, and how we've kind of helped the world with our knowledge and the things that we've done in the past. So with that, I will turn the call over to Chicky, and Chicky can kind of get things flowing.
Yeah, let's start, I guess. Cam, what was it like growing up in New Jersey? Like, how did you grow up, and what was childhood like for you that led you to even want to start strength training and even working out in general? Like, what was it?
Yeah, that's a good starting point. I was the product of a single mother. I played sports, growing up all through grammar school and into high school. And for the most part, I would say I was on the thinner side, without a doubt. I think generally most kids back then, growing up in the 70s and 80s, were all pretty skinny and thin. But I was on the smaller side, and I actually didn't really grow until probably like my senior year. And that's when I started getting tall and filling out. And then ironically, my mother actually started bodybuilding when I was a senior in high school, so she was getting pretty jacked. And, I learned a little bit from her, actually. And then, shortly thereafter, that's when I just started weight training. So.
What about you, Scott? Like, what was it like for you?
Yeah, my story's a little bit different. For me, we grew up in, Essex County in New Jersey. And for me, some people train for vanity, for fitness, to increase their on-field performance, some for strength. But for me, I had to fight my way home from school, so it was self-preservation that got me started. For those that don't know, Essex County in New Jersey is probably best known for its Italian-American population. As you see, Chicky's on the phone here. The Sopranos was actually filmed in my hometown, and they filmed the last scene there. So in a little, Holstein's. It's an old ice cream shop and diner. So it's kind of the area that I grew up in, and like most kids, we all wanted to be Rocky Balboa growing up. So everyone, it was a pretty fun place to grow up. People would pick fights with you in grammar school all the way up through high school. So for me, I was like, I'm just tired of having to fight my way home from school. So maybe I can, do the old intimidation factor, watching all the Arnold movies, Commando and Rambo growing up, and Rocky. I was like, fuck, I'm going to get in the basement. I'm going to start doing some curls and some bench press. We had a dip attachment to it too. So of course, no legs, because no one does legs. None of the Guidos do legs.
No.
But, after, obviously I started understanding that, weight training would actually help with sports too. Then you start working on the legs. But, for me, it was definitely, trying to preserve myself and not get my ass kicked too badly on the way home from school. Plus, I had an older brother as well, about 2.5 years older, which is the perfect number to get your ass kicked by your older brother, because there's nothing that you can do to defend yourself. Right, Dickie? Mortal enemies. Chick has an older brother about the same age gap. It's the wrong gap. So yeah, you have to lift weights, and it gives you that toughness, that resilience, because you can take a beating when you get older, but once you're big enough and strong enough to give it back, man, oh my God, they're fucked. because you can take it and give it. So.
I used to literally fantasize I'd be in the fucking gym, and like I would just imagine these scenarios where my brother and I would get into a fight over something, and I was like, if I could just do this just a little bit heavier, if I could fucking just do this just a little bit heavier, it would be that.
Yeah. And then when you punch him in the face, it'll hurt a little bit more, and maybe next time he'll think twice about starting shit with you. But yeah. That's kind of what it's like growing up in New Jersey, though. All the little Italian Americans, they all love Rocky. They all want to be Rocky. So, yeah, that was kind of, how I got started. And then obviously, with the sports and stuff, I played baseball my whole life, and then, high school football. Yeah. So that's kind of
how would, I guess we'll go to the birth of this whole thing. How did you and Cameron meet? Was it something where you guys had mutual friends, or was it more or less like serendipitous, like you just happened to be in the same place, same time, same interest? How was it?
Well, in New Jersey, there's very few people working in the squat rack doing actual squats. They're usually curling. But him and I actually met at the squat rack. He needed a spot, and then, we just started talking. Yeah, and we both like to work out. I used to read all the old bodybuilding magazines. So did he. So we had a lot to talk about. And he's very outgoing, Cameron. He's very extroverted. I'm fairly introverted. I probably didn't talk to anybody in the gym before he actually came up to me. So yeah, he kind of broke the ground there, asking for a spot. And then, it's like, hey, as Cameron would say, you want to train tomorrow? So
yeah, that's how it started. We just started meeting at the gym, catching some workouts, and then in short order, we started eating a post-workout meal together at his house and grilling chicken. And then it was like, hey, want to go to the club tonight?
Scott used to have chicken, freaking grilled chicken in his pockets.
Right.
You go to the bar, man. You want to be serious. You want to be the next Flex Wheeler, the next Kevin LeBron, Dorian Yates. You got to carry chicken in your pockets.
So you guys meet at a place called Strong and Shapely, right?
That's correct.
How would you describe Strong and Shapely, to people who don't know what it is, or what type of gym is it? Do they have TVs for when you're walking and stuff? Like, is it like one of those?
Strong and Shapely was, back then was like the East Coast Mecca. It was like the East Coast, Gold's Gym. And at any given time, you had, probably like 5 pro bodybuilders in there. And everyone was tossing big weights around, and especially when you're, 18, 19, 20, and you're just kind of starting off and, trying to find your way in the gym, and you see these monsters there, and it was a really good atmosphere. So there was no shortage of like, guys to you were looking to emulate or try how many. Yeah, I want to use what he's using, or how strong is this guy? So you're always sizing yourself up, and there was a lot of guys were strong, so you had a lot of ground to to try to make up to get there. So it was a really good environment to really push the envelope, and really test yourself.
Before, it's funny, before the internet, and I think I'm the last generation that actually remembers this, but I remember being in the gym. If you saw somebody do an exercise you had never seen before, and it was like, and if he didn't come back to the gym, you were like, fuck, how am I ever going to do that? Like, I didn't learn it the first time. Like, I'll never forget it. I saw some guy doing, like, he had the rope, and he was laying on a bench, an incline bench, and he was doing like overhead tricep extensions like this. And I was like, was it incline? Like, what was it? I remember, and I was like, just hoping this guy would come back so I could see him do it again. But like now with the internet, like you could just, you just type in some freaking scattered search results, and you get video after video after video after video, where it was like, when you guys were starting, more or less even than I was, you guys would have to go and like read a book about it, or like you wait for an article in a magazine, right?
Yeah, that's the early years. I mean, even my high school coaches, they took all of the free weights out of our gym and they replaced with Nautilus because of, what they were reading, all the bodybuilders, and they the Arnold's Encyclopedia basically was the end all be all of books in the United States. So it really set back sports training like 30 years at the time. And, not until really the internet came back and muscle media was born, strength coaches and books were just impossible to find. And, no one even knew what's, athletic performance training was. So,
the first, exactly what you said, Chick. The first, the first real taste of intelligent, science-backed literature was Muscle Media 2000 was a magazine that kicked off back then, and they had a monthly section from Charles Poliquin, who was a Canadian strength coach, and that was the only information, especially from a sports science perspective, or strength training perspective, that you could get. Everything else was the bodybuilding magazines, and then here's this guy writing actual kind of like science-backed articles based on the stuff he's learned, coming up through the ranks, some Eastern European literature, Russian stuff, and we every month we waited for that magazine to come out to see what he usually did an article, and there was also like a question and answer that you could write in, and they were just like tons of gems in there that we just ate up.
But that's what's so crazy now is like I said, now with that the internet and the advances it's made, it's now you just type in something and it's there. Whereas it used to be like, if you wanted to learn something that you couldn't find anywhere, it was like a journey. It was a quest. You had to find out what bookstore, how far away it was. Like I compare it to like independent movies back in the day. If you were living in New Jersey and you wanted to see some French New Wave film, you had to find some abstract theater in Harlem or the Lower East Side that's underneath, a club that you got to walk through 3 closets to get to, and you might be lucky and get there and see the movie you want. If not, it was like trial and error. You got there and they were playing 3 other kung fu movies just so you could get to the one Jackie Chan movie. Everything is just here.
Yep. It's, they got it good now, the millennials, but for us, we had to definitely rely on these Muscle Media 2000 magazines, and then Poliquin, he would introduce you to like books, that we could read. He was also a NSCA, CSCS, certified strength conditioning coach. So immediately we're like, all right, we need to digest this information too. So Cameron and I went after that, that certification. It was very, well regarded.
How rare at the time was that certification? Was it rare to have that, or was it something where you had to go to like pretty?
It was very rare. I think, I didn't know anybody that had it. So, I think, unless you went to like a seminar or, any kind of those.
Strength coach was. If you said you're a strength coach, they were like, "What's that?" Actually attending some of Poliquin's early seminars way back then. This was like, late 90s, early 2000s, and he was pretty much the only show in town when it came to that stuff. So he was definitely like a pioneer in, traveling around doing seminars on strength training, sports performance,
What were like the main principles he always talked about? Like what was like the principles of his training methodology?
Scott, you want to handle that?
Yeah. So he had like, the first article that I really kind of like hit me was the training with maximal weights. It kind of just changed the way that we lifted forever. Like he was very popular into like the German body comp program. He had a principle that was like accumulation and then intensification. And I still use these principles to today. So accumulation phase would be like, I'm trying to ramp up my volume so I can increase my work capacity. And then it tapers into, using heavier weights and then lowering the volume down so that, your body can have a specific adaptation to whatever you're trying to do, like increase your deadlift, increase your overhead. So typically you'll kind of allocate majority of your volume to whatever your goal is. If you're an athlete, obviously, sport specific training, you're going to emulate the movements of the sport. So, Poliquin was, he was a pioneer in terms of getting that information out to people. And also telling us where he got his information. So, he inspired a lot of people. So.
To
add on that, he was a big fan of, the compound movements. He also discussed, how to train for athletics, which really not many people were talking about. Everything, as we talked about earlier, came from Arnold, and that's, you can't train that way if you're an athlete, So he also, always described all kinds of techniques and, principles you can use when you're training, sports, different athletes, long jumpers, sprinters, shot putters, football players, hockey players, and so on. So yeah, he really, kind of led the way, and especially when it came to like popularizing it. You know, there were strength coaches around here in the U.S. for some football teams and stuff, but they were kind of like in the closet. You know, you didn't hear about them ever.
Yeah.
High school programs these days is these coaches, they have no idea what they're talking about. So you'll have, for instance, I've had 2 kids that played in the Irvine area. Their coach brought in a CrossFit coach to train them. They were running around the track backwards and doing kettlebell swings and burpees. My athlete, I had him he had a shoulder injury, and we kind of milked it out for a while. And he ended up winning their regional weightlifting tournament on his first lifts, and he didn't do anything that they told him to do. He just did, what I had him do. He won the power clean, the bench press, and the squat. All literally, they all got 3 lifts. He won the contest on his first lift, and he won it for his whole team. And the rest of the team didn't do anything. So the coach fired the CrossFit program. Just like anything else. A lot of these other coaches, they were bodybuilders too. And then they, like my coach, he brought in Nautilus. Just, if things were different, man, oof. I mean, I could have, really started and harnessed that testosterone when I was in high school,
How would you, I guess, like knowing what you know now, both of you guys, what would you have done differently? If you could go back, knowing what you know now, what would you have done differently to pursue? Like, I know, Cam, you started out as bodybuilder, but then eventually you got into sprinting and then strongman and bobsled and all of that stuff. Like, what would you have done differently in the pursuit of those things?
I think, if I had known I was going to get into sports more, I would have ditched the bodybuilding stuff and just immediately started with some Olympic lifts and, low rep, heavier weight stuff, I think ultimately, the bodybuilding gave you a foundation. And then, as you got more specific to the sport, you tweaked your fibers, or you tweaked your, your work capacity to, what you needed in the sport. But I probably would have just embarked on it a little bit sooner, the heavier strength training stuff and Olympic lifts, and even some plyos. It took me, I was probably lifting 4 years or so before I actually, kind of got into that stuff. So it was definitely, longer process where I could have been farther along had I got started earlier.
Yeah. That all comes down to people that are influencing you. These kids these days, they're able to get on Instagram and watch what their friends are doing. They have their parents advocating for them. My parents didn't even feed me. I had to go out and fend for myself. Probably would have benefited to have someone there kind of, providing you with good information. I think a lot of the kids that are successful in high school, especially, they may have like a coach, or a strength coach that kind of guides them and gets them started. Okay, you need to be doing squats and power cleans and deadlifts and push presses and things that are actually benefit you in your sport. Whereas, if those are your coaches, especially in football, these coaches they want to keep a tight, ship. So you got to do everything that they're telling you to do. And if you're doing anything outside of there, they are not happy about it. Even now to this day, the high school coaches, will resist.
Which is so weird, because it's like, why shouldn't it be like this cross-pollination of ideas where it's like, look, what you do at practice is one thing, but the end result should be you want the best player possible. So why is it like, it just seems to me like they do such a disservice anytime a coach does that, because it's like one system is ever going to win out. You know what I mean? It just never is. It's a hybrid of all these other systems you're bringing in, which makes what's most optimal for you. You know?
Unfortunately, you're at the mercy of the system, the coaches' egos and that team first mentality. Your performance and your abilities to increase your chances of getting a scholarship or moving on in your sports is secondary to them. They don't care about that. It's all about, their ego and the team. And, you would hope that, they wanted the athletes to become as great of weapons as they possibly could, but, it's not the case of, in the way of things. So
can we go back for a sec? I just had a question. When I was in high school, I remember the BFS, the Bigger, Faster, Stronger program. I don't know if you remember that. The dude who played for the Lions was always like the poster boy. Kevin, what was his name?
I don't remember.
But I remember it was like every year at the beginning of the summer, you'd get to football camp and they'd say, what's your 1 rep max and bench? And they had the charts up. It was like, if you could do 135 for 12 or something, you know what I mean? And they had the calculator. And so I remember they posted it and I was like, man, my max is like 225. So I went out there and I tried
telling everybody that's your max now.
Yeah.
You told
And
all
I
your
went
friends,
out
my
there.
max is 225. You never actually did it.
Yeah. And I went out there and I was like showing off in front of all my friends. I was like, dude, I can do 225 right now. Throw it on the bar. And they were like, all right, well, we're not spotting you. And the bar came down and it pinned me on the thing. And they were all laughing at me. I was like, what the fuck is this BFS shit? I was like, it said I could do 225. And I just think about that now. And I'm like, I remember all these lifts where it was like, you had no idea what you were doing. But because this paper said it, you were like, well, this has to be it.
The New Jersey Guido, that's the decapitation. That's the, the old, the guillotine in New Jersey is the 1 rep max in any bench, gym. There is the Jersey guillotine, we call it.
Yeah. So what would you say, like, I mean, besides Poliquin, like, what was, if there was any other gyms out there, or let's say systems of training, was there any that you modeled, like when you guys were like, all right, we're going to come up with a gym together, right? We're going to make something. Like, was there any that you were taking, obviously Poliquin, but like, were you taking things from other places where you're like, this is what we want this place to be?
So Cameron and I, we visited a lot of the Olympic training centers early on in, our sports performance training. So I would say that between probably Strong and Shapely, they had a lot of different specialty equipment. A lot of it was powerlifting specialty equipment. They had the safety squat bars. They had cambered bars. They had buffalo bars. They had all of these things before anyone even knew what they were. They had glute ham raise that was like from 1970. You can't find a glute ham raise in 1970. They didn't exist until CrossFit came along and blew it up. But yeah, I would say that we were probably a combination of like an Olympic training center, like a specialty powerlifting gym, along with, because later on we became known as more of a strongman gym. So, because we both competed in strongman professionally. And we had all the strongman equipment. And then, track and field was a very big influence on us. So I'd say it'd probably be a combination of all of that stuff. So that would be kind of how you would describe East Coast, West Coast, as well as, all the reading that we've done and all the different, strength coaches that we kind of followed and, and studied.
Because we each have, a kind of a diverse, athletic background, having dabbled in, different sports, both Scott and I, but, the basics don't change, it's always, sound, tried and true, stuff that's stood the test of time. And it just kind of like, you just tailor it and tweak it to your sport, you just have to learn the application for it. But for the most part, we've been successful in various sports because of those kind of foundation type principles that we learned, way back when. Like, there's nothing new under the sun. People just try to repackage it nowadays to see what sells or what looks good on Instagram. But, nobody wants to hear about the basics. But anybody that's a top dog or a professional or, the best of the best, that's where they started. They started with the basics. That's not, what got them there. Sure, once they're there, then they can sell any kind of nonsense they want that looks good on Instagram. But it's the classic stuff that, has stood the test of time, And this is stuff, from the Russian literature. This is stuff from, stuff Poliquin popularized, and was able to, universally apply it to sports and Olympic athletes and, stuff like that.
It's like they're all just taking and like bastardizing like the basic stuff that you guys, taught me from like the beginning.
Yeah, I think regardless of whatever sport you play, the basics are going to help you out. Cameron, he ran track, he ran the 100, the 60 meter, he pushed for the U.S. bobsled team, he won 2 gold medals. He was a pro strongman. He won a national championship. He played tennis in high school, but the basic movements that he did prepared him for all of those sports, and that's kind of what we're talking about. You have to squat, you have to deadlift, you have to do hip extension, you have to do knee extension, you have to press, in different angles, you have to row, you have to do pull-ups, all the basic stuff, the core work. People don't want to do the core work. They want to do crunches and what they see on a TV infomercial, but that's not the stuff that's going to make you into a great athlete and allow you to transfer force, absorb it, redirect it on the field. And that's kind of, I think, what separates us from other places is that, we've played all these sports. we've seen our performance elevate. I've trained so many kids, so many, champions in all different sports. And, we are, strength athletes. We take that information, that knowledge, and we apply it to all the different sports, and everyone, adapts and they benefit from it. So,
well, now you guys I know that you guys have moved into corporate wellness programs, and it's like, how would you explain that to somebody if you have a large company, right? And you're selling yourself. What do you say? Like, what is the benefit in you coming there and teaching these people how to work out and showing them, like, what's the benefit in the long run for them? Like, we know, like, sure, they might lose some weight and all that, but like, in terms of their productivity, is there a difference? Like, what is it?
Yeah. So I wouldn't say we just got into corporate wellness programs. I think we're going on 11 years. I have a background in finance and economics as well. I worked for Experian, the credit reporting company, and I did competitive intelligence for them. And then my coworkers from that position, they knew I ran a boot camp and they knew I was training athletes. They asked if I could kind of start a corporate wellness program there. So I did. From that, a lot of people know that we train the Blizzard Entertainment employees. They make Activision, they make Call of Duty, they make World of Warcraft, all the, the South Park episode, Diablo. And now their Overwatch game is very popular. But, when I went in there, they asked me to come and, interview because they heard about the Experian Wellness program. So I just told them what I did. It was very real. I was going to, basically introduce the, their corporate population to, free weights. And then from that, we ran the boot camp. And then we started a circuit training program, and we started like a kickboxing class. And then obviously, because people are sitting and working, these crazy hours. I think at Blizzard, the average employee probably works somewhere between like 12 to 16 hours a day. You're sitting in a chair that long. It's going to ruin your posture. It's going to ruin your hips. It's going to ruin everything. You're going to get tight hip flexors. Your glutes are going to completely become mush, and your back is going to start to become kyphotic. And, you need to remedy those things or offset them. So it's a big part of the program is we kind of, get these people moving, help them lose weight, which also, kind of obviously helps their posture too, because they got all the weight in the front kind of pulling them down. And, once they get started, it changes things. So after, I believe, 8 years or so, they finally ran some numbers on, sick time, healthcare savings, attrition, and their employees were, that were doing the boot camp, were not calling out sick. They, would stay at the company longer because they couldn't go anywhere else where they would have that kind of benefit to their quality of life. And it's such a great atmosphere to be in. It's very supportive. I mean, these people are like family, and they get to know their other employees so well that if they need something in a different department, they can get it like that because they train with these people. When you have a training partner is like choosing a husband or a wife. You know what I mean? If a good training partner is going to show up, they're going to be reliable. They're going to, spot you the way that you want to be spotted, and they're going to give you ideas, and you're going to share all your life experiences with them. They become like that's why Cameron is my best friend, and he's still my best friend. I've lived in California now for like 20 years, and he's still back in New Jersey, kind of waiting to, retire from the fire department. And, and we've done so much together over the years, but, the corporate wellness programs are definitely a big part of that equation now. And I never thought that, I'd be training just average, normal people like that. But, these are all great people. They become like family. They all have great hearts, and they're all so very appreciative of what you do for them too. Like I get emails and letters from these people.
I remember doing the boot camp with you, that there was people who, they wanted to lose 50 pounds or whatnot. And like, I would watch them like over the course of time as they were getting closer and closer, you just saw like they had this incredible like gratitude. They had like this new outlook on life where they like could just do anything now. They felt limitless because you had changed what they had been given,
Yeah. Imagine playing video games your whole life and emulating these superheroes and these characters, and all of a sudden you're starting to look like one of them. It's like they're just like, oh my God, this is great. I mean, I had a girl, she had a double master's degree from Cal Berkeley, Everyone knows who I'm talking about if they're watching this. She was, overweight, just typical bookworm. She was a data engineer, or she is a data engineer. And she ended up losing a bunch of weight. She ended up packing on muscle like crazy. And then she asked me if she can learn Olympic weightlifting. So I started teaching her how to do Olympic weightlifting. And then from there, she wanted to do strongman. So she ended up winning California's Strongest Man in the women's division. And she started from never playing sports in her life, just basically, studying her whole life. She played the piano, and that's about as athletic as her childhood was.
Yeah.
So, I mean, literally, we're, you get to change the lives for people. Yeah, man.
It's a really good fit too. When you're working as many hours as they're working, you have to balance that out with some kind of athletic, some kind of fitness activity that's burning calories. And it's great that Blizzard supports employees with that, and also providing the campus that's suited for being active, the gym, the outdoor boot camp, the track, all that stuff.
Yeah. What would you say, like, I know you have, let's see, you have Sean, right, at your gym. How many times has he won California's Strongest Man? How many times has he won America's Strongest Man? You have Casey, you've worked with Martins Likas, who's, the world's strongest man right now. Like, how would you say, like, you have the corporate wellness over here, which is completely normal people, and then on the opposite end of the spectrum, you have, like, the strongest men in the world. Like, how would you say you've managed to balance that? How does that happen? How do you do that?
Yeah,
I guess that's what I'm trying to figure
amazing.
out.
It really sets the bar high for anyone that trains at the gym. That's for sure. We don't just have the strongest men in the world. We have the strongest women too.
Yeah, you have
and that's even funnier. Yeah, our women are stronger than most of our male, people that we train. We have Sean DeMarinis. Sean, he's won California's Strongest Man, I think, 4 times. He's also America's Strongest Man 4 times, which is a record. He has many, just individual world records for, like, the stones and the log press, all that good stuff. He's just a monster. We have Leifa Ingalls. She won the first ever pro Arnold strongwoman competition on the main stage, beating women that are heavyweights. She's a middleweight, actually, so she weighs less than 180 pounds. And all the women she's competing against are in their mid 2s. So I mean, she is just a phenom. And then a year later, I started training Ashley Crawford. She won her pro card eventually after we put her back together, because she trained at CrossFit. So I had to repair her shoulders first, and after we repaired her shoulders, then we got her going in strong women. And her and Leafy took 1st and 2nd at the strongest woman in the world, which has never been done. Like, one gym has the 2 strongest women in the world. I mean, Leafy is just absolutely amazing. She's even like the first woman to ever pick up the Husafell stone, and that's that famous rock in Iceland that's a barn door, and people would pick it up and try to walk around the barn. She became the first woman to ever pick up that stone. So it's pretty amazing. And then on top of that, you have Casey Garrison and Bogert. Bo was one of my earliest athletes. They both took 2nd at America's Strongest Man. And then Bo, after he moved back to his home state of Colorado, he ended up training with Brian Shaw when Brian just started off doing strongman. They met each other at Colorado's Strongest Man. Bo won the middleweights and Brian won the heavyweights. And then it's a very low level competition. And then they started training together, and, Bo kind of introduced him to kind of our style of training. So, Brian Shaw, 4-time world's strongest man, he trained with Bo for, 2 or 3 years before Bo stopped doing strongman. Kind of Bo showed him kind of the way that I set up all our workouts and how we structure, strongman versus kind of our weekly template. So, our, the amount of strongman that we trained, Martins, he trained in 2016. He was, I think he just was becoming a pro, and he needed to hone in on his technique. And, he just came out and, he's already a great athlete. He's like a circus freak. And then, I always told him, Martins, if you gain some weight, he was like 240 at my contest, and the heavyweights are anywhere over 231. He weighed 240 competing as a heavyweight, and he still took like top 3. I think he competed in California's Strongest Man in 2013. I think he took 6th. And then the following year, he took 3rd.
I remember he had long hair.
Yeah, he had long hair. he never won California's Strongest Man, ironically. But then, he ended up winning his pro card, I think, in 2015. And then he went to World's Strongest Man in 2016. And that's when, he started coming out to train with us. And, I showed him, some of his weak events and technically had to switch those things up so he can use and harness his natural gifts so that he can, kind of level the playing field in those events so he can win. And then he competed World's Strongest Man in 2016. And then by 2019, last year, he ended up winning the entire thing. Just very happy for him. And the cool thing about Martins is he's the exact same person that he was, in 2013 when he first started than he is now. He's super humble, super cool kid, very grateful, very thankful. Like I would help him on any given day, anytime, even back then, and he's he's a good representation of the sport, and he's doing really well for himself, and I'm really happy and proud, for him. So.
Well, I guess that brings me to my final point. Where do you guys see East Coast, West Coast in, let's say, 10 years? Because, it's been 10 years now, maybe longer, right? Like, where do you see, not just the facility, but, like, where do you see you guys in terms of who you're training, the level of athletes you're training more than you are now? Like, where do you see it?
So on my side, currently, we are training whatever athletes come out to us. We've trained UFC we've trained UFC fighters. We've trained Bellator MMA champions. We train a lot of high school athletes that want scholarships or want to play at the next level. We have, obviously our strongman team is, very well known in, we have 8 pro cards. You can't even find 8 pro cards in any state. So, in terms of athletes, we're just going to keep kind of doing what we do. We have, we definitely have a good system in place. But I think, the thing that this global pandemic has changed is a lot of people can't leave their houses now. So, people are looking for us to kind of train them from their house. So this has kind of forced us to, look into virtual training. So, we're actually going to be adding some tech this week so that we can also train our wellness programs as well. So that's going to be a big aspect of, of kind of how we are going to be changing up the way that we train at the gym. So, eventually I guess we can make that available to other people, but I was always against the typical online training because you can't really train somebody effectively, by writing them a program and then them sending you videos after the fact. But if we can do it virtually, like we're doing right now, we're talking to each other. I think it's a possibility as long as you're kind of coaching them, appropriately, having the camera set up and giving them the appropriate cues at the time they need them, and, making sure they're using the weights that are appropriate for them, teaching them the techniques that, that we teach at East Coast, West Coast for all the different big movements, because it's not, like doing a squat and a deadlift isn't as just easy as just putting a bar on your back and squatting down, or, putting a bar on the ground and picking it up. There's many ways that you have to, set yourself up to do it properly so you don't hurt yourself, especially if you're training, video gamers that never lifted weights before in their lives. It's a liability, so you have to kind of get them, used to kind of activating their core muscles and getting their the postural muscles, up to snuff first. And then after that, then you can kind of show them once they know how to use their body and actually have the strength to get into certain positions, because some of them can't even get into certain positions enough to squat or deadlift. So, we have to teach them these things. So in order to do it virtually, you're going to need to be doing it, just like you're training in front of them. So we're going to see how that goes. And then on top of that, I just wanted to also congratulate Cameron because Cameron is going to be retiring in June 18th. He has 15 more working days. He'll be retiring from the Patterson Fire Department as the Deputy Fire Chief. He's been there for like 25 years, and he has been through probably the 2 biggest catastrophes that we've ever seen in the country. He was in the 9/11 fires. He actually supported the New York Fire Department by running lines from the Hudson River over to the Ground Zero. And then obviously he's been in the middle of this pandemic in Patterson, which you know, as we talked about before, is the second largest, you know, in population density in, you know, in the country. So, but yeah, he's gonna be retiring soon. And then, you know, hopefully it doesn't end up like one of those diehard moments where it's his last day of work and a meteor explodes, you know, falls from the sky and the Jersey Shore explodes, all the Guidos go flying. You know, I'm hoping one of those things doesn't happen to him, but he's got 15 more working days and hopefully he can survive. And then hoping, you know, he can be more bi-coastal. He'll be coming out to California more often. So, but yeah.
Yeah. Chick, to kind of answer what you were asking before, you know, I think ultimately, you know, ECWC is just going to keep doing what it does. You know, the like we said, the basics are there. There always will be. You know, and ultimately, I think the cream always rises to the top. You know, and then, you know, this, you know, I hate to harp on it, but just, you know, this Insta fitness era, you know, with you know, $99, $29 programs and stuff. It's kind of like junk food, you know. It's always there and you can eat some of it, but ultimately you need, like, you know, you need the good clean macros, you know, to sustain you. So and I think that's us, you know. We're ECWC, or get your 100% organic, grass-fed strength.
Right.
Us.
That's right. I think, you know, just to finish it off, is it's true. Like, now you could throw open Instagram or go on YouTube and, like, everybody's an expert, but none of them have really ever done it or learned about it. So it's like, they may look good doing it. They have all these different, you know, quotes that they'll throw up on the screen, but it's like, how many of them have ever actually read the literature? How many of them have ever competed in a contest? You know, how many of them have went and visited and sat through these lectures with the Poliquins and those guys? You know, none of them. But because they got 1.5 million followers, people think that they're an expert on it. And then, you know, you quickly find out it's like, it's a facade. It's not the real thing. Learning how to actually do it, it's like you're in a basement learning how to squat. You're not doing it in front of a camera with all these fancy lights, you know?
Yeah, man.
Yep.
We've been doing it a long time now. So hopefully we'll be doing it for a lot longer. You know, making more champions and doing what we do. So that's the East Coast, West Coast way. Legit, you know, just, you know, old school training methods with, you know, new school kind of mindset, always adapting and increasing our knowledge. And, you know, definitely that hard, gritty mindset is a big foundation for what we do at East Coast, West Coast, which is, I think, why we have so many, you know, successful athletes, as we instill that mindset in them, that, you know, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. And I say that to these kids all the time. You have to bust your ass. You have to show up. You have to be disciplined. You know, I can't make you a champion if you don't show up. So, you know, we kind of set the tone with that. The kids, they quickly adapt to that tone. And then we just fucking pump out champions left and right, you know, whether it's in strongman or whether it's in, you know, football or whatever sport, you know, MMA, doesn't matter. If you're an athlete, man, we can help you. You know, we plan to keep doing what we're doing, and we're going to do it the way that we always done it.
That's my favorite part about your gym, though, is that I watch all these different athletes and all the corporate wellness program people. It does feel like a giant family, because it does feel like they've all bought into this thing. You know, they weren't sold on something where they just, after a few months, were like, it is what it is. Like, I see them show up year after year, and then their brothers come, and then their little brothers come. And it's like, now at a certain point, because I've been around long enough, I see people who's like, this brother went to this college and he played football at this program, and this brother's there now, you know. And it's like, seeing it, it's crazy, because you're like, if it was a one-time thing, it's a fluke. But when you see it done over a long, sustained period of time, you're like, it's obvious. It is working. Like, it's legit.
Yeah, it's like
in the eating.
Yeah.
It's like a good pizzeria or a good restaurant, you know. You know, we don't really have to sell ourselves very much. The product speaks for itself, you know. When they see their friends and their siblings, you know, increase their performance and, you know, get fit and live the lives and increase their quality of life. I mean, doing things they've never done before. I mean, it literally just sells itself, you know. But unfortunately, these days, it just seems like the social media is how word gets around. And, you know, I think, you know, hopefully with the increase in our technology, we can kind of keep up with these Insta famous people and these, you know, the way that things have gone. So we'll definitely be looking forward to introducing you to some of our athletes, and then some other people that we know in the industry, and hopefully give you guys some content that you want to listen to. So
yeah, we'll share some of our go-to people, whether it's some nutrition people, some chiropractors, physical therapists, things that make the machine run,
Yeah. Awesome. Well, guys, it's been amazing. Cam, Scott, I appreciate both of you. Any last thoughts?
Well, if you guys are just looking to to get into training and getting a strongman, there's a lot of resources out there, but if you're on the West Coast, you can look us up, eastweststrength.com, and from that point, or our Instagram and Facebook is East West Strength. So we're very easy to find. Just get in touch with one of us, and then hopefully, we can get you started on maybe your next chapter in life. So that's what we do. Just trying to changing lives, through the knowledge that we have in strength, and and the things that we've learned over the years. So
the same thing here on the East Coast, East West Strength, NewJersey.com, and East West Strength, New Jersey on Instagram.
Awesome. All right, guys. Well, it's been a pleasure.
All right, Chicky. Thanks, buddy.
Yeah. See you guys later.